All right, hi everybody. Olivia Reiner here for Packers News, joined by Ryan Wood. We've moved inside today. It's a little rainy. It's getting cold out there. I hate to say it, but Ryan, I feel like we're really approaching the gross, cold, rainy weather that characterizes a Green Bay fall.
It was our first time talking about the weather today with Sean Menenga, the special teams coordinator. Always a rite of passage during the course of a football season. When does the weather start to become a conversation? So yeah, I think the temperature, the high for Monday is supposed to be 49, so the first official sub-50 weather game. Not that you or I or any of us call that cold here in Green Bay. That's more balmy than anything. But, well, see, you're from Philadelphia.
It's still cold.
No, you should be used to it. You're from the north.
If I've got to put a jacket on, it's cold.
You're from the north. I'm from Indiana. I'm used to the winter up here, so.
It's still cold.
When I moved here from South Carolina 5 years ago, I thought 49 was cold, but no, not now.
All right, guys. Well, let us know. Do you think that is cold? I think it's.
They're all going to say no. They're all going to say no.
I know, but we've got people from
You're a
all
minority
over
of one.
the world
in
our chat right now, watching the live stream. We are live over on Facebook, on Periscope, on YouTube. So, as I always say, wherever you are, thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. I am going to pull up the Facebook chat in just a moment. We'll get in there into the nitty-gritty with all of your questions. We love to hear from you. If you have questions, make sure you leave them over there. But we'll start by discussing the injury report for a moment. Aaron Rodgers, yet again, listed with a knee injury. He was limited in practice today. We only get to see maybe 20 minutes or so of practice. And from what we could see of Aaron Rodgers, his knee didn't seem to be limiting him in the individual drills. Now, once the doors are closed, that's when team drills start, and that's when the good stuff happens. We don't get to see any of that.
We don't get to see the good stuff, no.
So we didn't get to see whether or not Aaron Rodgers was, how big of a participant he was in those drills. So what do you make of the limited knee injury? Do you think it'll impact his availability? That would be the worst case scenario on Monday night.
No, he's playing. That's it. No, I can't imagine a scenario limited with a knee. He's playing.
All right, that's all we have to say from Ryan there. But yeah, it's a good point.
It's always
something would have to happen serious for him not to.
It catches your attention when you see QB1 on the injury report, but I can't fathom that he wouldn't play Monday night.
So let's talk about some people that are not necessarily sure things for the game, and I would even argue that they're probably going to just be ruled out very soon. The Packers practice one more time tomorrow, and then we'll get some final sort of injury reports heading into the statuses heading into the game on Monday. But Davante Adams, once again, did not practice today with a turf toe injury. Darnell Savage Jr. has an ankle sprain, I believe reportedly a high ankle sprain. He did not practice. He was not in a boot today, which perhaps means that there's some progress there. But in terms of the two of those guys being ready for Monday night's game, I would say that's a pretty far shot.
It seems that way. Now, we just saw Kevin King not necessarily come back from the dead, but come back from doubtful, which might as well be coming back from the dead on the injury report a week ago, to play pretty well Sunday. So you never know. It's so hard to predict these things because, and that was a good reminder of, even when you think a guy is down and out, you never know how the body's going to respond. With that said, Davante Adams and Darnell Savage Jr. sure seem like they're not going to be able to play. It would be a surprise at this point. But it was a surprise that Kevin King played last week, so we can be surprised.
That's true. Crazier things have certainly happened. Hello, everybody in the Facebook comments. I am pulling you guys up now. Yannick is from Denmark. Wow, I don't think
we've had 49 degrees
Denmark
cold?
before.
I say it's not cold. I don't think it's cold in Denmark either.
Yeah, what time is it in Denmark?
Late.
What hour is it in the day? Stanford asks a question that Pete Doherty dabbled in his most recent column, something that we also talked about in the live stream yesterday. Will the Packers go after another wide receiver before the trade deadline? Is it something that they have the means to do? Do they even have the desire to do it based on everything, all the factors that are in play right now? Davante Adams likely to be out. This upcoming game, arguably, he could even be out for the game against the Raiders in 2 weeks. We just don't know exactly what his status is. It's not going to be a super long-term thing from what my understanding of what a turf toe injury is. But with him out, with what they have right now in the arsenal at wide receiver, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, the only drafted wide receiver in that group right now. Do they need to go out and find a wide receiver on the market?
If they can find one, then yes. I mean, if they can go get A.J. Green for a mid-round pick, then all power to them. It's just, I mean, the Bengals have been pretty staunch that they're not trading A.J. Green. Now they're always staunch until they're not, so who knows what that means. But it's tough in this league to make trades. It's just the reality. So it's always less likely than it is probable. But I thought a really interesting point that Pete made in his column was that running back, in his opinion, is a bigger need than even receiver. And I think it's really interesting. Not saying that I agree or disagree, but it's an interesting point because they've got really one playmaker at each position when you look at it. Maybe a little bit more depth with Jamal Williams as a guy who can be reliable. Whereas, Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Geronimo Allison are still kind of developing into that role. But they've got Devontae Adams, they've got Aaron Jones. And then it's question mark. I mean, the rest of the skill positions right now, it's question mark. So you've seen flashes from some guys, MVS, Geronimo among them, but consistency is not there. So you're looking where can this football team use help on its roster? I think skill positions the place.
What steps do the wide receivers need to take in this upcoming game against the Lions? It was a quiet game from the receivers relatively against the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah. Aaron Jones had a remarkable game, 4 rushing touchdowns.
He was the top receiver.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Literally, 182 all-purpose yards. He was phenomenal. Can the Packers rely on him to replicate that performance in a game against the Lions, or do they need to see a little bit more production from their receivers?
Well, you'd like to see more than 4 catches from your receivers, so yes. But can he replicate it? I think I don't think we know right now. I mean, we knew with Mike McCarthy, he was very staunch, rigid on his philosophy with preserving Aaron Jones through the course of the season. He was not going to overextend him in September and October. You just weren't going to see that. We've seen with Matt LaFleur now twice where Aaron Jones has gotten more touches in a game than he ever did with Mike McCarthy. So he's shown a little bit more flexibility with that. At the same time, he's also said, and he's paid lip service to, he needs to keep Aaron Jones fresh throughout the season. So I think it's going to be interesting this week. I would, if I had to guess, and it is just a guess, I would guess that he doesn't get the 20 touches against the Lions. But, the circumstances are very similar. Probably no Devontae Adams again. This is going to be a real litmus test for how, I think this week, for how Matt LaFleur approaches the need to preserve Aaron Jones and how to do that, if he's willing to go back-to-back heavy workload weeks or not. That's a big question.
So Mike's got a question about Aaron Rodgers. He just wants to know, what are our thoughts on his play through 5 weeks now? Aaron Rodgers has had some pretty remarkable plays. He's shown some great mobility over the last couple of weeks. I know at the beginning of the season, that wasn't necessarily something that even I know we had talked about. We were not seeing that sort of mobility, that ability to break out of the pocket, just to run the ball, and he's shown that a little bit more recently. But that being said, through the air, he's not. His passer rating isn't as high. It's sort of average right now. And Jim Ozarski is going to be writing a story all on this today for tomorrow, I believe. So that should be up at some point later today. But in general, what are your thoughts on where Aaron Rodgers is at this point in the season?
I think Aaron Rodgers has played well enough, and this is not to sound cliche or trite, but he's played well enough to be 4-1. I mean, he's the best part has been what he always does, and he's minimized the mistakes. And this offense as a whole, primarily because of how the quarterback has played, has minimized the mistakes while having these growing pains and needing to kind of figure out who they are. And that's big because when you have a young offense in its infancy like this, you can see a lot of sloppy play, and you haven't seen that. So that's relevant. He's not setting the world on fire. He's not where he was in 2017 before the broken collarbone. He's not where he was run the table in 2016. He's not playing at the height of his game. I think Aaron Rodgers would be the very first person to acknowledge that. The question really becomes, can he get there this year with this offense? And that's what we don't know yet. But what we do know is that he's played well enough to win, and that's really the job of the quarterback first and foremost. He hasn't played well enough to win maybe in years past with different defenses, but he understands the strengths of this team. He understands that a punt or taking a sack like he did in Dallas to preserve a timeout and run clock. That's not necessarily the worst play all the time. And he's played well within the strengths of this team. So there's a reason they're 4-1. Quarterback play is a big part of that.
So does he need to get there, or is it just enough to say the Packers are winning, what he's doing is enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think eventually he does need to get there if they want to win a Super Bowl. Because eventually you're going to go up against the Drew Brees most likely. You're going to go up against the Rams and their ability to run the football. You're going to go up against, if you get there, a Tom Brady or a Patrick Mahomes. Eventually, you're going to need Rodgers being Rodgers at the height of his powers. I mean, you're going to need that to win, to get a ring. They haven't needed that to be 4-1. They don't need that to get to the playoffs. They don't need that to win the NFC North. To get all the way, they're going to need that.
All right, let's pivot to defense. We've talked enough about offense for now. Who needs to continue any of that? We'll go to Rick's question here. He asks, how much will Oren Burks' return help the situation and an inside linebacker? As we know, Blake Martinez has seen a bit of a revolving door alongside of him. B.J. Goodson has been the one that the Packers acquired just a handful of weeks ago to fill in, and he's been fine. He left the game early against the Cowboys, and Oren Burks was thrust into the role probably a little bit earlier than he might have wanted to. Initially, he was out there working on special teams, but he ended up getting out and into the inside linebacker spot and contributed.
Yeah.
How much more can Packers fans expect to see from Oren Burks in this upcoming game? And do you think he is back to contributing to the level that he was before his injury?
I don't know if he's back after one game, but I do think, the plan seemed to be that he was just going to play special teams in his first game. Then B.J. Goodson gets injured, and all of a sudden in the second half he played, I think, 11 snaps, which was fewer than he even played on special teams. I think he got 19 team snaps. So, they acclimated him slowly. They planned to even acclimate him slower than they did. And it's just too early to know. I mean, we've got to see more than 11 snaps to know where he's at, where his game is at. It's not ideal for a young player to have the injuries that he's had early in his career. But he was a third-round pick, and they're going to want him to play that role that he called it special situations defense, which is primarily be a coverage linebacker, and they're going to want him to play that.
All right, I've got a question here from Katie. I'm curious to know what article she's referencing. So, Katie, if you have the story or a link or something, I'm curious to know. But she said she read an article about Matt LaFleur being a great coach. She wants to know how much of the results of the team thus far are attributed to LaFleur being a good coach, or is it he was handed the right pieces in his first year with the Packers?
Probably a bit of both. This team has talent on its roster. There's no question about that. With that said, when you look at it, I mean, the moment wasn't too big for him opening night for the NFL in Chicago. The moment was not too big for him at Dallas with a really limited roster. I mean, I thought that was LaFleur's best game, the way he was able to come up with a game plan to work around the deficiencies on that roster. Only 4 receptions from receivers. His ability, I mean, the creativity and keeping some of those big receivers in for pass protection. It was a really creative game plan. So, and on top of that, not just the offensive mind that we saw, and like I said, I thought that was his best from a game planning perspective, but getting the team ready to play. When you are the underdog on the road, what's the best way to come out with a win? And I wrote about this immediately after the game. The best way is to jump on that team that might be overlooking you a little bit, might be feeling a little overconfident from the very beginning. 14-0 in the first quarter, 31-3. They jumped on the Cowboys on the road. They did what they needed to do as an underdog in that setting, and that's reflective of coaching. The other thing that's reflective of coaching, turnover margin. I mean, that's a huge coaching metric is, does your team take care of the football and does it generate turnovers? And in both cases, the answer to that has been yes. So you've seen some good coaching moments from a very, early, fresh out of the gate young head coach, and theoretically, he'd build on that.
Yeah, so answer both. How's that? Katie says that was an article from Rob Demovsky over at ESPN. So,
all right, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Let's see what else we got from you guys. Here, Buddy points out Rashon Gary is missing in action. Would you agree with that? Or personally, I think we've been seeing more of Rashon Gary over the last couple of games. The defense has been playing well enough that Preston and Zadarius Smith have been able to come out at least in the last game against the Cowboys. And we've seen more of Rashon Gary and Kyler Fackrell. What have you made of his performance in being the substitute, so to speak, for the Preston Zadarius Smith show?
Well, Mike Smith, the outside linebackers coach, said Monday, he was remarking on this about how the reality of their situation at that position is that they don't need Rashon Gary to come in and set the world on fire right away. They don't need to overplay him. They don't need to overexpose him early in his career. They have the luxury of patience with him to let him just play that role that he plays as a reserve behind the Smiths and develop at his own pace. And I think that's what you're seeing. I have no idea down the road if Rashon Gary is going to be a top 12 type talent out of this draft or if it's never going to happen. I don't know, but it is beneficial for a young guy, any young guy, to be able to have that patience and develop at his own pace. And I think that's only going to help him going forward. Doesn't mean he'll get there, but they haven't needed more from Rashon Gary because of what the Smiths have done.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up in just a moment here. Last question. It's not even really a question. Reese just says Tim Williams. That's all he had to say. But why don't we talk a little bit about Tim Williams? He was recently acquired, free agent outside linebacker, or excuse me, not free agent, but he was acquired from,
claimed,
he was claimed, wavered.
Waiver wire, yes.
Waiver wired from the Baltimore Ravens, has some familiarity with Zadarius Smith. He played with Tony Brown in college. He had some fun Tony Brown anecdotes. We always love a good Tony Brown anecdote because Tony's
there are a lot of them.
Quite the personality.
Yes.
But yeah, so Tim Williams right now early came in, looks like he's going to be a big special teamer. What do you project to see out of Tim Williams? Did I say Tim Williams? I think I said Tony Brown.
No,
Williams.
We talked about both. So special teams primarily, because he's a fifth outside linebacker. So you're probably not going to see a lot of defense from him unless there's an injury. And if there's an injury, then his situation on defense could change really quickly. But until that time, if they stay healthy at outside linebacker, he's number 5 on the depth chart, which means that he's going to be special teams.
All right, cool. So keep an eye out for Tim Williams over on special teams, and keep an eye out for another live stream tomorrow. Last day, we'll have one more post-practice live stream, give you guys the latest, the rundown of the injury report. We'll have much more details about the various statuses, just some more final thoughts from the team on who might be ready to go on Monday, who might not be ready to go on Monday. So you're going to want to come back to wherever you're watching this right now and get some more information.
That exact spot. Go back to that exact spot.
Yeah, you know what? Don't even close the browser tab. Right now on my laptop, I've got like maybe 20 tabs open in my browser.
Terrible.
Oh, yeah.
I think I actually have over 100 tabs open on my cell phone.
That's brutal.
It's not good. It's not good for the battery.
Question of the day. A friend of mine from college tweeted this out today. She said, would you rather have your current salary or would you rather have the number of browser tabs you currently have open times $1,000? So think about that. Let me know what you think.
Tabs.
I think I'd rather have, we're not going to go into specifics today, but a fun thought experiment. It made me laugh.
Yeah.
But guys, yes, make sure you come back to wherever you're watching this to come back and chat with us. Make sure you're checking out PackersNews.com for all of your Packers coverage. And of course, follow us on all of our social media channels for lots of updates, stories, whatever randomness, things that we're picking up on at practice, in the locker room. You'll want to check it out. Guys, thank you again for joining us.